we were supplying a medical device, but gradually we are getting into supporting a physician in making the right clinical decision across a spectrum of devices or therapies. Yeah. So that decision support ability is another very big shift. And lastly, I call it deviceuticals, in a sense that devices were one thing, pharmaceuticals were another. And I see that these two will come together and form this platform, what I call deviceuticals, wherein you will use a personalized device and personalized medicine and create very personalized therapy for an individual and not for an overall set.
Just in the best interest of time, I think we can begin now. And welcome to the Blue Circle, everybody. Thank you very much for taking the time out today and joining in. It's such a big privilege and a pleasure to reconnect with everyone, our distinguished panelists who are handpicked because of the think input and the rich experience that they bring in. And thank you to our distinguished audience for joining us, most of whom are CEOs, CXOs, and senior leaders. Many of them are repeat visitors and members to our webinars and platforms, which is very encouraging and motivates us to provide high levels of dialogue through the online channels as well. And for those of you who are new with us today, Blue Circle is the world's first sector-specific networking app for business leaders that's built in India. We currently focus on 20 sector communities, such as e-mobility, energy, real estate, healthcare, logistics, aerospace and defense, and many more. We also present socioeconomic insights, which ultimately determine the evolving complexion of the market. Along with our weekly webinars and our digital publication, you'll be happy to know that we very recently launched the first version of the Blue Circle app for leaders. It's something like the sector-specific LinkedIn for senior leaders, a space to have meaningful conversations, connect with over 5,000 like-minded leaders from India and across the globe, house high-quality curated content, and access business opportunities across these 20 sectors. So those leaders who are interested, please do join us. I will share the link to the app in the chat section, and we'll soon send out your invitations to our new guests post the webinar as well. And today we're privileged to have big minds and leading thinkers of the industry join for our healthcare community's discussion. The topic is global changes affecting medical devices. In the best interest of time, I will just briefly mention the names and designations of the leaders who've joined us today. We have with us Mr. Prabir Das, Asia Pacific and India Chairman and Managing Director, Terumo Asia Holdings, and Executive Officer, Terumo Corporation, Japan. And our chair and moderator for the session is Mr. Pavan Chaudhary, best-selling author, CEO Vigon, public intellectual, Chairman Medical Technology Association of India, and sits on several boards across the country. Both the speakers bring in deeply local understanding and global perspectives because of Mr. Das, who is an executive officer of Terumo Corporation, Japan, and Mr. Chaudhary is a trustee with Bharatiya Videsh Nidhi Parishad, which is the Indian Council for Foreign Relations. So thank you very much, sirs. Thank you, audience, for joining in today, and welcome everybody. I now request Mr. Chaudhary to please chair and moderate the session.
Thank you very much, Siddharth, and big pleasure, Prabir, having you with us. As we are beginning the discussion, the light has gone out here, which is emblematic of the fact how different the world is in general. However, what are the currents which, according to you, Prabir, are constant and uniform across most parts of the world? And what are those local changes which are happening, or in what ways the world is changing and where all it is remaining the same? Let me ask you that to begin with, Prabir.
Thanks, Pavan. Before I start, first things first, thank you very much for having me on this chat. You call it a fireside chat. You will still need some fires. Perhaps, you are in Delhi, the temperatures are dipping. I'm in Singapore, and I was just wondering what it would be like to sit next to a fire in Singapore. It's already quite warm, but yeah, and to your point that the light went off, the light also came back, and that's the reality. That's the reality. Every time the light will go off, it will come back. Every time there is a bad day or bad situation, ultimately the light comes back. To your question of what all is changing and what is not, fundamentally, and I'm mindful of the fact that there may be many friends from the industry and there may be friends or colleagues from outside of the industry. So I'm keeping it generally not very technical. Yeah. At any point in time, we can dive in more, make it more technical if there is a need. But I think what is not changing is the fact that in spite of healthcare being the second biggest industry in the world, the biggest industry in the world is agro. Healthcare is the second biggest industry in the world. A lot of people may not be familiar. It still has only 30-35% high quality provision throughout the world. So that's one thing that has not changed for a very, very long time. We have made a lot of technology advancements, but access per se has not significantly improved. In a sense, one of the things that always intrigues me is that healthcare is so local in a way. After food, the way it is delivered, the way it is structured, the way it is managed, the way it is reimbursed, it's an extremely localized business. Healthcare is a localized business. It differs. How you administer healthcare in the United States and how you administer healthcare in India and sub-Saharan Africa is very different. How you administer healthcare in certain parts of Delhi is very different from how you administer healthcare in other parts of Delhi. So it's extremely diverse. But within that, medtech, medical technology, tends to be a very, very global business. And there are reasons for that. There are reasons because it's a very long gestation cycle business. It requires a lot of in-depth, high resident knowledge. I take the example, Pawan, 4 or 5 years back when the alphabets of the world were making a foray in healthcare, we all thought that our businesses would be doomed. But we realized that it's not, because you really need a huge amount of knowledge of patient pathways or disease pathways, which the alphabets of the world would not have. They will need us, right? So some of the changes. But, you're talking about change and future. I keep it very high level. The way I see this changing is in two dimensions: technology change and business model change. When I look at technology change, we are seeing this whole push of remote technology coming into play, right? Disease, as you have seen more in this COVID situation in India, acute care has been pushed to subacute setting. Subacute care has been pushed to home setting. And in a sense that we are using a lot more remote or telehealth than in the past. That's an opportunity for India, a very big opportunity for India to leapfrog, right? The second area, and we'll touch upon them a little later, but I'm just summarizing in a nutshell before we jump into the details. Yeah. The other area where I see big shift, tectonic shift actually, is in the area of robotics. robotics, AI. At the end of the day, what a physician does is a combination of a ability to sieve through 1,000,000 data points quickly and refer to that data point, which is experience, combined with very deft hands. And if you compare, so to say, the capability that AI and robotics brings, it will create a whole lot of shift. The third area is where I personally see a lot of change is personalization of technology. We used to have one device, and and that was kind of globally applied, right? If you look at 3D printing process, 3D printed prostheses, personalized genomics, you're talking about more personalized medical therapy. So that's the third big change. And the last one, actually, not the last one, but another big change is more and more AI-enabled decision support. So decision support tools, right? In a sense, as a company, say, we were supplying a medical device, but gradually we are getting into supporting a physician in making the right clinical decision across a spectrum of devices or therapies. Yeah. So that decision support ability is another very big shift. And lastly, I call it deviceuticals, in a sense that devices were one thing, pharmaceuticals were another. And I see that these two will come together and form this platform, what I call deviceuticals, wherein you will use a personalized device and personalized medicine and create very personalized therapy for an individual and not for an overall set. So those are some technology shifts that I see happening. In business model, much will change, much is changing, much will change. On a lighter note, as a 100-year-old company, we operate in 160 countries. And in about 100 of them, the local governments wants me to manufacture locally, right? Whether it is even practical or possible is not what, the answer is no, it is not possible. But that's the expectation. So to a large extent, localization will devise, the localization requirement will kind of determine how high quality or poor quality care would be in that specific country setting. And there is a very large risk that it will become from poor quality to poorer quality and poorest quality, if we don't really open up the borders to technology. The second area that I see very large scale change is how we get paid, right? We were paid for a device, or a doctor was getting paid for a consultation, or a hospital was getting paid for an episode of hospitalization. More and more, this model is going to be disrupted. More and more, we are going to be paid for the outcome that we deliver. We have to prove that we delivered an outcome, and based on that outcome, we'd be paid. And maybe we'd be paid more for keeping a patient healthy than treating a sick patient. So that's a very large shift. And therefore, the models of investing in medtech businesses will change, or even healthcare investments will change. So far, I have, as a medical technology player, my investment cycle has been quite different from the investment cycles of a hospital, so to say, but they will converge, and maybe they'll invest more in us, we'll invest more in them. And in a way, we will see more integration in the way we create our business model. So these are some of these big shifts that I see. I've tried to deliberately keep it very generalistic, because otherwise we'd get too technical.
No, no, great. I think just the right note for this audience. The light here, electricity, has been coming and going in waves, but I fully accept your point that if you are patient enough and you have stamina enough, the light will come back again.
Yes, absolutely.
And we have a very good example from India in this case. When the third wave happened, the second wave happened, that time the kind of publicity which we got globally and the kind of shoddiness which got attached to India was perhaps at that time we felt, oh, how will we ever erase it? And let us compliment the government and our Prime Minister who braved that ignominy, continued forward, and now with COP26, etc., and whatever happened on the Quad scene, etc., he has, through his energy and determination, come back strong. We felt that this will take many years, this stain will take many years to wash, but it didn't because of his stamina. And the other point which you mentioned, I was reminded of the case of coffee. When coffee came into the market, it was not allowed to sell for 200 years because of political fear that coffee houses will become rebellion centers because people will talk about the government, etc. there.
Yeah.
And also because of the fear of the beer industry and the liquor industry. But today, we have found, as you were saying, there is space for everybody. And there were some certain needs or certain specificities which these industries were addressing, because of which they also galloped. So, which comes back to our fireside. So next time that we have a physical fireside, we can have a coffee or we can have a beer, and also it kind of gives us, as healthcare professionals, some kind of reassurance of longevity, reassurance of relevance, that even if the alphabets of the world will come, they will still need lights from our lamps. Otherwise, they will be fumbling in the dark. On the localization front also, you have spoken beautifully. And I was reminded of Adam Smith. He said this point, that the wealth of the world will increase because of division of labor and specialization. People who will make, countries who can make things cheaper will sell to other countries those goods, and some other goods will come to them. If every country starts manufacturing for itself, then the costs will not go down. If costs will not go down, demand will not be up, because that's cost dependent. Then that industry will start faltering. So you have very well said that hundreds of nations we operate in, we can't make the product everywhere. Great points, Praveen. Very good beginning you have given for us to develop this topic. Tell me, as far as changes which are concerned, which are coming in healthcare, please dwell on the changes which you spoke of, as well as a couple of other changes which you spoke of in an earlier discussion. One is this healthhusiasm, and how is it becoming a reality? Second is the demystification of the medical device sector. These are the 2 points. What are your views on that?
So, you know, this, I really like this whole newfound interest that people, general public, has in health. You know, I think the pandemic held a very big mirror to our face. Yeah. And we realized perhaps because the disaster that we see around us, in my opinion, I mean, you see more people being very careful with their health, what they eat. It's got nothing to do with, COVID per se, but the fickleness of life has perhaps come. I mean, obviously, it always has a short-term and a long-term effect, right? Short-term, people will not wear a mask and go out. There is almost a revenge behavior. But longer term, I think I see this whole global play of health enthusiasm in India as well. Now, I always say there used to be this philosophy of just in time, right? Now we are talking about just in case. Just in case I need a hand sanitizer, just in case I need. So there are these whole consumer shifts that we are seeing. I mean, when have we thought that we will have we will keep a oxygen concentrator at home just in case? When have we thought that we will keep a what do you call a capnometer just in case, right? And that, I think, is also an outcome of health enthusiasm. And we would see this only broaden. How healthcare systems are able to utilize that, capture that, expand on that, stoke that, is something that will depend on us and the healthcare community. What was the second point that you talked about?
How medical devices have get demystified as a sector.
Correct. So, I have been in medical technology, medical devices for 31, 32 years, right? And never has anybody, or generally speaking, never has anybody looked at me with so much appreciation that I see in a restaurant today. All of a sudden, the society has started realizing the value of a ventilator, an ICU, or even something as basic as a syringe. Yeah, a syringe was a syringe, and suddenly it is a tool to vaccination. So the societal awareness of medical devices has suddenly grown, especially within the intellectual community. I mean, I'm not saying that, in a village, people will know what a ventilator is. Maybe they used to know, they will continue to know, but I'm saying at least in our in other industries, we have a far better appreciation of medical technology and its value today, right? But that said, I think as a sector, we also need patient stories out. We don't do that well, right? I mean, today, people know what perceived benefit they would have if they drank a bottle of carbonated soda. Yeah, but they don't quite know the benefit of regular temperature taking or keeping a blood pressure monitor at home. Now, to a large extent, it is easy to blame the consumer, but I think we are to be blamed as well. We have not really gone out. I mean, we behave too much like engineers and not like marketeers, going out and educating society on what we need to do. Yeah. But yeah, those are what I would stop at right now.
Absolutely. So this health enthusiasm is evident in just in case we have stored things. Pulse oximeters, we have stored oxygen concentrators, wearables are coming into the game. Apps like from Healthify Me to Pristine, the Portias and Practos are there. Now new apps are coming and they are really taking things forward. In fact, I was just reading that we are very close to be able to determine whether Alzheimer's is coming to a patient after 10 years.
Yeah.
Just through his gait.
Yeah.
And also attempts are being made to anticipate that through his speech. So more and more concern for health, as well as more and more opportunities of technologies converging in the healthcare space is also getting us excited about it.
So let me give you a real life example.
Yeah, go ahead.
In Singapore, there is a program now, which is a hypertension, stroke, and cardiovascular disease management program. It's by the government of Singapore, wherein people have been given a blood pressure monitor, which automatically connects to a registry and uploads the blood pressure data. It's very simple, you don't even need a wearable for it, right? You just need a connected device. Now, through that, we are tracking blood pressure of a large number of people. And in addition, they have this, every now and then people are going for a lipid profile, they're going for some markers, and then that data gets uploaded, right? Now, artificial intelligence synthesizes that and creates a chatbot interaction with the consumer. So I would get a message saying that, Mr. Das, maybe you should increase your footsteps from 8,000 last week to 12,000 this week. Yeah. Or maybe you should reduce your salt intake by 25%, right? And they have visual dashboards through which they'll say you are at a yellow zone, green zone, red zone, in terms of 2 or 3 or a 5-year risk of cardiovascular disease. Now, this is giving the power to the patient. This technology enablement also will create health enthusiasm, isn't it? I mean, it goes both ways, right? And I gave you this example because it's not in theory. It's a program. There are thousands and thousands of people on it already. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just thinking what is coming. And because it is a reality already, I'm thinking that suppose I have a wearable and somewhere my cardiovascular system is having a little bit of a rhythmic disturbance, let us say, or let me say a disturbance in some slight disturbance, and I get alerted about it, then I might even become more worried about it, and because of that, it might go worse. So
yeah.
So we will have to have ways to filter those diagnosis generated anxieties and other things also.
Yeah.
But it is great that it is already happening.
Yeah. And quite frankly speaking, there are interventions built in that algorithm to take that anxiety away. There are that is where they have gamified it to that extent that there would be they know that there would be a certain anxiety built, and then how do you manage that anxiety? Somebody will call you, somebody will visit you, a chat bot will continuously motivate you, etc., etc.
Yeah, great. On the medical device scene getting demystified, you're right. Ventilators is something which my, for example, servant thought It is only the space above the door, which we from time to time ask him to clean. Now he knows what a ventilator it is, what a ventilator is. And a syringe is a life-saving instrument. Was not known to many people, but it has become a life-saving instrument. In fact, the entire vocabulary of techno-commerce has gone up post-COVID. My mother, she's a English gold medalist in English in her post-graduation. She also did not know the word supply chain, but now she says, "Kya iski supply chain to is in order na baba." So things are really, our lexicon has changed. COVID has changed not only our lenses, it has also changed our lexicon. What about if this is what is happening, Prabir, that so much of advance is coming? Then I feel very free flow of technologies across borders is really very important. What is your view on that? And what kind of channels will emerge? What is the geo-commercial landscape? How is the geo-commercial landscape changing? What kind of offshoring will happen? And will the current offshoring channels or roads change and new paths emerge? What's your view on that?
So, there are a couple of lenses there. Number one, there is this conflict between internationalism and nationalism, right? Like it was never there. I mean, it was always there, but right now I think it's a huge amount of conflict between ultra-nationalism and internationalism. I mean, I'll give you an example. Today, most borders are opening, right? But that in China is very unlikely to open. Why? Because in most countries, we have come to terms to live with COVID. But because the equity in China was built so high on defeating COVID, right? Eliminating COVID, that now with the current leader seeking another term or life term, there is no way that the country can accept a wave, right? So they are keeping it tightly closed. And when I speak to my colleagues in the region or people focused based in China, they know. I mean, throughout 22, China borders are going to be tightly shut. Now that gives us, or these kind of what do you call geopolitical complexities create a huge new paradigm. Yeah, and offshoring is a commercial reality. Friendshoring is the new cultural paradigm. You cannot necessarily only go where there is commercial gain. You'll also have to have the right cultural fit or the ethos fit, right? So that's something that will determine reshaping the global business centers. Yeah, shared service centers, so to say. So that's that geo-commercial shift is not there are newer lenses to it. Now, if we want to capitalize on friendshoring, we are going to increase our friendly quotient, right? We have got to be having the value proposition for the friendliness need to be very well articulated. Otherwise, you are going to lose out. Or I mean, it's almost like branding your friendship. Correct? with the right brand value, very well articulated as to why you are the right friend, why you are more long term or solid, so on and so forth. Now that will determine cross-border interaction. But one thing that I really want to touch upon is that when we talk about partnering, it is not just about across the border partnering. I think one very large element of partnering will also be across the industry partnering, right? In a sense, if you look at medical technology, apparently, and I don't know if today we have leaders from, say, energy or renewable energy or maybe defense. I know Blue Circle has a very large focus on those sectors as well. And if you look at telecom, if you look at defense, if you look at renewable energy or battery, there is a huge amount of equity sitting there that needs to be quickly brought into medical technology, right? And therefore, that cross-borderedness, something that actually a Blue Circle can actually facilitate, this kind of dialogue and that kind of network, first know who, then know how, right? There is, people say know how comes later, know who comes first. So, so that kind of blurring of the borders between adjacency industries is very, very important, because medical technology is no longer metallurgy and electronics or plastics. It's also about AI. It's also about algorithm. It's also about longer battery life, so on and so forth. The third border that we need to really break is this border of established companies and startups. I'll give you a very real life current example. Pfizer vaccine, Moderna vaccine, AstraZeneca vaccine, all of them have come from startups. Pfizer vaccine has come from BioNTech, which is a very young startup. Moderna is a startup, one product company. And the AstraZeneca vaccine came from sort of a startup in the labs of the Oxford University. So it's actually not even a startup. It's an academic institution. So this really, in a crisis, it got proven how important it is for a startup's agility and an established company's commercial muscle, them coming together. On a lighter note, I always say, there is a reason as to why in our scriptures 5,000 years back or even more, Lakshmi and Saraswati were made sisters, right? Now you see the Saraswati of a BioNTech and the Lakshmi of a Pfizer, the Saraswati of a Oxford and the Lakshmi of a AstraZeneca. They had to come together, and they will come together more and more if we keep the patient at the center. If you imagine the solar system and take the sun away and put another planet, put a planet in the middle, the whole thing will go for a toss, right? And healthcare has been going for a toss because we really did not put the patient at the center.
Yeah. So Saraswati and Lakshmi have come together. I should ask you for a composition for Vishwakarma and Sushrut and Charak also. That way the doctor as well as the medical technologist will come for our next session. We should surely please try to develop something on this. Great point. On the friend quotient point which you said, Prabir, how does a country raise its friend quotient? One is through history, for example, similar political systems, democratic systems, or a similar market system, a good history of protecting intellectual property rights. All these things raise your political quotient, friend quotient. And in this area, China is getting very strong competition from other countries like Vietnam and also India. And I hope India becomes the China plus one strategy for the West when it looks to Asia. What are the other friend quotient traits which our government can now bring in to attract this kind of technology and capital, which is predominantly there in the West and Japan? 17% of the world's population, they account for 70% of the world's technology and money they have. So the money is surely going to flow from there to here. Where we also have 17% of the population, but only 5% of the world's capital and technology. So what are the other friendly traits which we can develop now, other than the various valuable traits which we have already inherited?
So, there are many, that's a very vast subject. Yeah. What are the friendly traits? But the first friendly trait that you want to see in a person is stability, right? I mean, I don't know how many of us would like to make friends with somebody who's, very volatile. Yeah. So stability is a very important friendly trait, especially in business, right? Especially when somebody is putting money with a friend. It is very important to see stability in that friend. So there has to be some stability, articulated stability, not just stability as I think, but stability as I promise and stability as I demonstrate, right? Over a longer term. So that is a very important ask to like I said, to prove the elevated friend quotient. That's one. Second is the ability of the policymakers to break these barriers. I mean, today, if an engineering company or if an engineer does not have access to medical centers, medical technology cannot thrive, right? If a startup cannot access investment opportunity or an investor, then medical technology cannot thrive. So there has to be these, how do you say, वो हिंदी में बोलते हैं ना, आम भी है, दूध भी है, कटोरी भी है, बट एक कोई होना चाहिए जो मिलाएगा ना, हाथ तो चाहिए, right? So that hand, the hand of God, so to say, that brings the mango and the milk and the pot and the, and the mouth together is the thing that will increase the friend quotient, so to say. Yeah. So these are two things, in my opinion. One is stable policy architecture. Second is this facilitator approach. Yeah, going and saying, what is that you need? What can I do? First give, then get. And the last one would be making sure that we break down the boundaries between global and local, because healthcare is a global supply chain. You can't solve it locally. No country can solve its healthcare locally. They have to depend on a global capability. There are reasons as to why doctors train in 3, 4, 5 different countries. There is a reason as to why technology supply chains spread oftentimes 50, 60 different countries. So we can't just shake it all of a sudden. There is no point. Not only there is no point, there is no need. So those are some of the things that I would think are important.
You're right, and I think you've also
getting the friend quotient.
Yeah, I think you've also touched workforce skilling in some manner.
Yeah.
Availability of skilled workforce, demand support in terms of making sure that healthcare is spreading. So great points. I was reading the other day that today is like the Sputnik moment. Sputnik moment, as you would know, is when Russia launched the Sputnik into the space, and America, which was in competition with them, suddenly woke up and changed so many things, including a very easy immigration policy, which is how the people from IITs and other institutes reached America. So a similar Sputnik moment is coming, and I'm happy that the government is fully alive to this. One point I also have on friendship quotient, this friend quotient. There should be administrative reforms which improve the behavior, or let me say, which bring the behavior of bureaucrats in line with changing social status of the entrepreneurs. Earlier, entrepreneurs, as you know, were not so well regarded. Napoleon pointed towards UK and said, let us defeat this nation of shopkeepers, which was emblematic of the status of the businessman, which was low. General and bureaucrat was high. General to plunder and bureaucrat to distribute and administer. Today, the social relevance of entrepreneurs is very high, and they need an equal chair on the table. And if they do not get it, then without complaining about that, they will quietly move to another destination where they will invest their capital. So this is another important change which I feel, and I actually invoke. I hope this talk reaches the Prime Minister. Go ahead.
You are absolutely right. You know, how do you say? We have a very small window for that, I'm afraid, right? It takes a lot of political capital to be able to drive that level of administrative reform. And that political capital is in India today, right? It has not been there for a long time. And who knows what will happen in future. So that administrative reform, the window to do that exists, and it exists today. And we should make use of it, in my opinion, like there is no tomorrow, right? That is number one. And number two, how to make that happen? I mean, there was this huge discussion about lateral placement of administration, etc., etc. Yeah, you know, there is this big mistrust between government and enterprise, right? And that would happen if you look at the Singapore model, right? It works. Government works here to a large extent because it draws from industry, and industry draws from government, right? If you are able to do a little bit of that, that would really, really help.
Absolutely. And I feel that the social graces, if they will come, and they can come with such a strong political mandate, our Prime Minister has already removed the red lights, beacon lights. He has to just move a little further, and already the enlightened bureaucrats are understanding, and the others will follow suit. So, Prabir, we will have time only to discuss this much because there are some very good questions which have come. So, and we have quite well covered how the global changes are affecting the medical devices landscape. Let me first come to you with a question from Prabal Chakravarti, who's the General Council member of CII. He asks, and you and I know Prabal well, he asks, if preventive side of healthcare becomes dominant, logically, therapeutic side should get delayed or get reduced. Should therapeutic focused medical device players start shifting towards preventive? It's a very good question.
It's a fantastic question. And there is no yes or no answer to it. It's a question of a choice, business choice. But the point that I would bring to fore is that, healthcare delivery is best delivered integrated. Currently, in most countries, most definitely in India, healthcare delivery is not integrated. And preventive, the therapeutic companies getting more and more into preventive will expand the basket. How do I give this example? I mean, I could have a 1,000,000 patient group, but I could only be addressing 300 of them right now. But if I go to diagnostic, preventative, and then curative, if I play across the pathway, then it is likely that my funnel will become a lot bigger. So will I go away from being therapeutic? No, I will continue because that's my core competency. I will play on that core competency. But by starting to play in the preventative area, or rather diagnostic area, I will bring more patients into the treatment cascade. So that's an expansion strategy and not a portfolio change strategy, so to say. I don't know, Prabha, if I answered your question right, but it is not this or that. I mean, it is not the dilemma of the if, it is the genius of the and.
Yeah. And because Prabal is not here, let me try to speak for him. The if also was a genius at time. When this whole idea of focus came, focus, 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 sharper, sharper, sharper. At the same time, I understand what you're saying. You are saying in the current circumstance, too much focus would be a frozen state of mind.
One is that, and secondly, it is not necessary that we do everything ourselves, right? Healthcare is not a one-player play. It's not a golf, it's a soccer. In a sense, therefore, the health system operators like you and me, Pawan, we need to approach this with a consortium approach, right? So if I own a disease state, or if I target a disease state, it is very important for me to pull adjunct players. Somebody is preventive, somebody is diagnostic, somebody is curative, somebody is palliative. Get that ecosystem together, will then go and solve a real life problem integrated. So that does not mean that if I had a certain core competency, I'll dilute it. I will not. I will actually sharpen it. When, boss, only when a diamond and a gold will come together, then you have a ring, no? Otherwise, what will you do with that diamond? I mean, you can keep it in a locker, it's of no use.
So it is just as in the case of countries where you spoke of friend shoring. Here you're speaking of friends scoring together.
Yeah.
And a consortium kind of approach happening. You're very right. Actually, it is happening also.
Yeah.
Home healthcare companies are tying up with hospitals or becoming arms of hospitals. Hospitals are also getting into home healthcare, but the other trend is also happening. Coming to the next question, this is from an anonymous attendee. Thanks for discussing the trends in healthcare and medical devices. Any advice on how a leader of a medical device company preps himself to see around the corner? How does he get the focal lens to see around the corner?
I'd say, how does she? Because, I really think that we need more she's in leadership. Come to think of it, for me, it's very simple, I call it the combination of 3 C's: compliant behavior, compassionate behavior, and driving continuity of expanded healthcare. So the 3 C's: continuity, compliance, and compassion. If they come together, you have the leadership today. I mean, this is, in my opinion, the biggest CEO currency today is compassion. And COVID has proven that. Now, we could go on and on. It's a very deep question. There are so many other contours to leadership, but fundamentally, that the combination of these 3 C's and really reimagining a more human healthcare. I'm reading this book called, it's a book by Summer Knight. It's called Humanizing Healthcare. Summer Knight is the CEO of Deloitte. She has written this book called Humanizing Healthcare. You know, we go into a healthcare system, everybody is throwing data at us. Nobody is really providing a word of comfort. So I think we need to humanize healthcare. You know, it's a very stressful industry. It attends to people who are in stress. So in a sense, again, summarizing, reimagining the future, how healthcare will be delivered, what medical technology can do, combining it with the 3 C's of compassion, compliance, and continuity. Very important.
Yeah. And if I was to add to it, I would say, if you want to look further into the future, look deeper into the past, because all these changes which we are looking at, even the democracy to totalitarian, and from market economy to controlled economy, have happened many a time. So that would also perhaps prep him to be able to see further.
And one additional context is, please, for God's sake, as a healthcare leader, please put the patient at the center. You know, if you put the patient at the center, 90% of the complexity is gone. Unfortunately, healthcare is not designed to put the patient at the center. I'll give you an example. Man went to moon in 1969, right? Yeah, 1969. That's 52 years back. And every vital parameter of Neil Armstrong was getting monitored from Houston. So remote existed 53 years, and it took a COVID for us to really make it happen. So technology has been there. It's just not been humanized.
Absolutely. So we've got a compliment, Prabir. The anonymous attendee who asked a very sharp question. He says, thanks, Prabir and Pawan, very insightful, appreciate it. Now coming to the last set of questions, and I'm clubbing all these questions in one. And one is, throw some light on the current regulatory hurdles in medical device sector in India. Second is supply chain shortages, how they have impacted medical device industry. And okay, localizing trends you've already seen, you've already spoken about. And third is data integrity. So 3 points: regulatory hurdles in medical device sector.
Very good question. The first one was
regulatory hurdles.
What was the first one?
First one was
regulatory hurdle. So let me take them one by one.
Okay, go ahead.
You know, on a lighter note, I say in this artificial intelligence world, I am naturally stupid. You know, so
there are two like you. Count me in.
So take it one by one. Regulatory hurdles. You see that I think in India specifically, we have seen a lot of regulatory improvement over the last many years. I must compliment the government for making that happen. But that said, medical technology regulation has to be medical technology regulation. It cannot be colored by pharmaceutical regulation. So that's one hurdle that we really need to streamline. The second, being very succinct, is the fact that there is a lot of confusion in creating a Indian standard as opposed to a global standard. Now, on one side, we want to manufacture for the world. On another side, we want to have Indian standard. It's a very confused state of affair. We really need to have one global standard. We want to utilize the global market. I can't say that I would treat a patient in UK in a way that is a certain quality, and in India, I'll deliver a certain quality. You can't do that. Yeah, that's immoral. Forget illogical, that's even immoral. And lastly, with a massive amount of digitization of medical devices, remotization, digitization, we really need to build muscle, because how you regulate a device, an engineering device, and how you regulate a software are very different skills. So we really need to quickly transcend that capability and become more capable of managing and regulating IT better.
Yeah.
What was
And
the
if I
second
was
question,
to,
Pawan?
if I was to add to that, I would say the preferred procurement order also is something which might reduce the overall quality, which has never been questioned so far, as is also shown through our medical tourism advance of medical devices in the country. And
Yeah.
there are some tariff issues also. Great points. Coming to data integrity. And one more thing, I'll have to add some more questions. Actually, most of the some questions have come on my WhatsApp, and most of them are relating to startup financing. So because you also sit on the board of Vadhwani Foundation, please comment on that also after you have spoken about data integrity.
So data integrity is very important, but we need to ensure data integrity by safety systems and quality systems, not necessarily where the data is hosted. That's my opinion. I mean, you can have the data hosted on domestic soil and still be very insecure. You can have the data hosted in the cloud or some other location, but still be very secure. I'm not an expert in that area, but commonsensically, I would think that we should go by not where the data is safe, but how safe is the data. That should be the determining factor.
Great. And I would also recommend to the questioner to look at our webinars on data centers. Before I come to the last set of questions, coming to how supply chain shortages have impacted medical device industry.
Very badly. In a sense, there are three reasons, or there are three components to the supply chain challenge that we are going through. Number one, you see an unprecedented rise of demand in developed markets, which is tilting the demand supply gap. In a sense, if the developed markets consume so much at higher profits or ASPs, that really suddenly drains away from the developing market. That's one. The second is huge input cost increase, which is because of material cycle disruptions. Today, for an example, if you have a plant in Philippines or in Vietnam, and there is a lockdown, right? So suddenly you have this whole and see, none of these plants were engineered keeping safe distancing in mind. In most plants, you don't make people stand 2 meters apart. So now we are having to reconfigure whole manufacturing architecture. So that will create a lot of supply shortage. And lastly, though everybody is aware, the way the container shortage or port congestions, these are really adding to. And in my opinion, you will continue to see this cost skyrocket through FY22 next year as well.
Agreed. How should startups get funded? As an investor, what is your advice to startups? for procuring funding?
So first things first, the value proposition should be very clear. I mean, I don't mean a slide, but if the purpose of a startup is to sell, in a sense, this, you know, I work with a lot of startups, and sometimes I don't want to work with them because even before they have determined what the value proposition is, they're thinking exit, right? So you don't build an enterprise with a purpose of valuation. You build an enterprise for the purpose of converting into an institution. And as long as there is a clear pathway to what institution, what purpose you are solving, how you are solving it, I don't think investment is the problem. There is more money in the world than the use of that money, number one. But in my opinion, there are three kinds of investors. You referred to Wadhwani. Wadhwani will invest to create employment. So that's more social investing. And there are other social investors. Two are the likes of the private equity funds. They are investing in a short sale cycle. They're investing to create wealth, mostly for themselves and their investors. And third would be investors like us, established companies who are investing to create a strengthened ecosystem or better access to technology or parts of the market. So as long as you have determined what are you, I mean, are you seeking investment for social gain? Are you seeking investment in the short term, or are you seeking investment in the longer term? That value proposition needs to be very clear. But I would, to my startup friends, I really ask you to find a conscience keeper. Perhaps somebody like a Pawan or someone, who can shine that mirror on you, saying that, hey guys, you're not even making sense. Forget investment.
Well, thank you very much. And I would like to add what a dear friend of mine spoke to me the other day, that when these startups are when a startup is going to look for funders, he should look at 3 Gs, which you have almost referred to. First is the geography, whether that person invests in your geography or not. Second is the genre, whether he invests in your subsector or not. And third is the gene, whether he invests at your level of evolution or not. For example, a Terumo would not invest at X level, at lower than an X level. And so I think you've very well summarized the point, and also you've highlighted, don't look at exit. First, look at creating the value. So great points, Prabir. I wish there was more time, but I'm sure that the people who were there, they enjoyed the dialogue, and I hope we will be able to answer any other remaining questions by connecting them to you at a time which is convenient to you. So thank you very much, Prabir, and I'll pass it on back to Siddharth.
Thank you very much, sir. Such an insightful and engaging conversation, and an absolute privilege to hear you both. Our guests and I, we've been hooked till the end, and I've taken home several nuggets from today's conversation. I'm also receiving messages from our members as we speak, and I really wish we had some more time. And also thank you to our leaders in the audience for joining us and for staying till the end. And along with our weekly webinars and our publication, we're taking these discussions and conversations and B2B opportunities across our 20 sectors live on the application. So whether you would like to engage with us, our leaders in the audience are invited to join the platform. So thank you very much, sirs, once again, and we look forward to having more such interactions in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Prabir and Siddharth.
In closing, when the light goes off, it comes back again. That's the biggest learning. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Take care. Very good point. Very good closing. Bye.